When Zara Tindall stepped into that private drawing room at Windsor, nobody expected her to walk out having detonated the most unexpected confession in modern royal memory. The woman known for her loyalty, for her silence, for her refusal to ever step into the spotlight finally broke. And when she did, every rule the monarchy depended on began to crack. This wasn't rebellion. This was betrayal from within, and the family never saw it coming. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. In that moment, the atmosphere inside the room shifted, as though the weight of years had finally collapsed onto the polished table between Zara and the senior royals who had summoned her. Her words were not shouted or dramatic. They were calm, steady, and painfully deliberate. "I can no longer defend the monarchy's rules." And with that single sentence, she shattered the illusion that the palace still held unquestioned loyalty from within its own bloodline. What followed was not outrage, not fury, but pure, unmasked disbelief. These were the people who trusted Zara to be the quiet one, the dependable one, the granddaughter who never questioned, never argued, never disrupted the fragile machinery of royal image-making. But behind closed doors, Zara's confession was a spark tossed into a tightly sealed chamber, and the first tremors of panic rippled through the room. They needed clarity immediately. What did she mean by refusing to defend the rules? What had pushed her to say something so destabilizing? And why now, after decades of quiet compliance? It was that uncertainty that frightened them most, because uncertainty in a family built on control is more dangerous than open defiance. The senior royals exchanged looks that carried years of unspoken fear. Fear that something beneath the surface had been brewing long before this moment. Fear that Zara had seen too much, absorbed too much, and reached a breaking point they had failed to detect. The truth was that Zara's words were not a sudden act of rebellion, but the result of years of tightly packed, deeply buried tension that had grown heavier with every unspoken expectation. Every whispered warning, every compromised silence she had been forced to carry on behalf of the crown. Her confession was not simply an act of refusal, it was an indictment of a system that had been stretching her loyalty thin, thread by thread, until it finally snapped. In her voice was something new, something the monarchy was not prepared to confront: conviction. And with that conviction came the quiet acknowledgement that Zara had witnessed something deeper, darker, and far more systemic than anyone outside that room could imagine. Her refusal to defend the monarchy's rules hinted at not just dissatisfaction, but revelation. Revelation that could unravel the institution from within if the truth ever surfaced. But to understand why Zara finally broke her silence, we must uncover the years of pressure, compromise, and hidden fractures that pushed her to this irreversible moment. Zara Tindall grew up believing she had escaped the suffocating grip of royal life. No titles, no formal duties, no rigid protocols defining every breath she took. But she soon learned that freedom was an illusion. Every decision she made, every smile, every stumble, was still a reflection of the monarchy. And the burden of carrying a name she didn't choose slowly twisted into something unspoken and unbearable. From her earliest years, Zara tried to build a life that existed outside the palace's iron expectations. She carved her own path with determination, telling herself that independence meant immunity. But the truth settled over her slowly, tightening like a rope around her ribs. No matter how far she ran, the monarchy's shadow stretched further. It wasn't the ceremonies or traditions that weighed on her, it was the unspoken command to be an example, a symbol, a reminder of what the royal bloodline demanded, even from those who never asked for its privileges. That pressure only grew heavier as the family weathered scandal after scandal. Whenever the institution trembled, it was Zara they pointed to, not with words, but with expectation. She became the safe one, the stable one, the one whose quiet loyalty could steady the wavering public image of a deeply troubled monarchy. And although she never complained, each moment of being held up as proof that the family remained intact chipped away at something inside her. Behind closed doors, the demands became more subtle, more manipulative. Zara was never ordered to defend the monarchy's rules outright. She was asked gently, indirectly, with the kind of polished persuasion that makes refusal seem selfish. Could she clarify a misunderstanding? Could she offer reassurance during a crisis? Could she remind people of the values the post incorporate? Crown stood for? These weren't innocent requests, they were obligations, wrapped in politeness, used to pull her back into a system she had spent her life trying to step beyond. Privately, frustration burned through her, but it had nowhere to go. A royal who does not hold a title is given even fewer spaces to speak, fewer places where honesty is allowed to survive. So she swallowed it, year after year, carrying the weight of contradictions no one wanted to acknowledge. She was free, and yet she wasn't. She was independent, and yet her name was used like a shield. She was valued, but only when convenient. And though she hid it well, resentment began planting roots deep within her, roots that would eventually grow into the very confession that shook the crown. The palace failed to see that by relying on Zara as their quiet stabilizer, they were pushing her closer to the edge. Every time she was asked to defend rules she did not believe in, another crack formed in her resolve. And each crack brought her nearer to the truth she would one day speak out loud, a truth that would leave the monarchy stunned. Yet this silent struggle alone wasn't enough to ignite her confession. Something far more damaging was unfolding behind the palace walls. Most people believe the monarchy runs on tradition, ceremony, and public goodwill. But tucked away beneath the polished routines lie rules the public never sees, rules that even senior royals whisper about. Rules enforced with icy precision, rules designed to keep the family controlled from within. Zara encountered these rules firsthand, and when she did, it began quietly, almost innocently, with a mention of an internal guideline meant to uphold dignity. But Zara soon discovered this was only the surface of something far more unsettling. There existed a secret rulebook, older than many of the faces who followed it, crafted to dictate behavior in ways that the public could never imagine. It laid out expectations with a cold, clinical exactness, addressing everything from who must remain silent during crises to who can be sacrificed for the sake of the institution's image. Zara had always known the monarchy valued control, but she never understood how deeply that control was woven into their private lives until she saw these rules laid bare. For a non-working royal like Zara, the rules twisted into something even harsher. She was in the family, yet not fully of it. She benefited from the bloodline, yet bore the brunt of obligations without the privileges that might have justified the constant scrutiny. Enforcement was subtle but effective phone calls reminding her of appropriate timing, advisors insisting she avoid statements that could be misinterpreted, and silent glances that carried warnings sharper than any spoken reprimand. It wasn't open discipline, it was manipulation, dressed in civility, designed to corral her into compliance. What unsettled her most were the rules that contradicted basic human freedom: restrictions on expression, limitations on personal alliances, unspoken demands that she distance herself from people she cared about when it suited the monarchy's narrative. Every breach, no matter how harmless, carried consequences delivered behind velvet doors. Zara soon noticed how these rules weren't applied evenly. They were adjusted, stretched, weaponized depending on who needed to be protected or punished. And in those inconsistencies, she saw the monarchy's fragile truth. The more she observed, the more sharply her conscience clashed with her inherited loyalty. She watched individuals inside the family endure indignities simply to preserve an image. She witnessed moments where compassion should have triumphed but was crushed beneath protocol. She saw how rules meant to maintain dignity now served to preserve power. And every instance deepened the conflict inside her, pulling her further from the unquestioning loyalty she once believed she owed. In private, she began questioning the morality of defending such a system. How could she stand by when she knew the cost those rules inflicted behind the scenes? How could she justify practices that stripped people of autonomy in the name of tradition? These thoughts were the earliest roots of the refusal she would one day voice, a refusal the monarchy never believed she would dare express. But the turning point didn't arrive until Zara saw these rules weaponized in a way that struck painfully close to home. The moment Zara realized she could no longer stay silent came when the monarchy's rules weren't used to guide or protect, but to punish. A private family dispute spiraled into something colder and more calculated, and Zara watched someone she loved become collateral damage in a political game. That single incident didn't just break her trust, it broke her loyalty forever. It shattered the boundary she had spent years maintaining between her personal life and the institution that constantly demanded more from her than she was ever willing to give. It began with a mistake, small, human, easily forgiven in any ordinary family. But within the monarchy, ordinary mistakes are luxuries few can afford. Instead of compassion, the response was swift and merciless, delivered with the kind of precision that made Zara's stomach twist. Her loved one wasn't offered understanding or support. They were quietly summoned, questioned, judged, and handed consequences disguised as protocol. What should have been a moment of unity became a ruthless demonstration of power, and Zara could only watch as the crown turned its back on someone who had sacrificed just as much as any titled royal. She had always known the institution could be strict, but she wasn't prepared for how fast tenderness could be replaced with cold calculation. Advisors whispered in corners. Senior royals exchanged glances heavy with strategy rather than empathy. Decisions were made in hushed discussions behind closed doors, and the people affected weren't invited into the room. Zara found herself standing outside those meetings, piecing together the truth from fragments of conversations, realizing she was witnessing a system that didn't sway, it crushed. The emotional fallout was devastating. Her loved one retreated into themselves, wounded by the realization that loyalty meant nothing when the monarchy wanted a scapegoat. Zara carried the weight of their pain like it was her own, feeling anger burn through her as she watched them struggle with humiliation, fear, and a helplessness no one deserved. She tried to intervene, to appeal to reason, to push for mercy, but every attempt was met with the same cold refrain. This is how it must be. Those words echoed inside her like a warning, telling her that the rules she'd been defending all her life were not guardians of tradition. They were weapons used without hesitation. In that moment, something inside Zara snapped. She had spent years bending under the pressure of obligations she never agreed to, swallowing her frustrations for the sake of her family, convincing herself that staying quiet was the safest path. But watching someone innocent become a pawn in a carefully crafted image, war forced her to confront a truth she could no longer avoid. The monarchy valued control more than compassion, reputation more than fairness, to silence more than integrity. As the days passed, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about the institution she had tried so hard to support. Was this truly what the monarchy stood for? Was this the legacy she was expected to uphold? Every thought deepened her disillusionment and solidified her resolve. She made a private vow that she would never again defend rules that inflicted harm. She would no longer lend her name to decisions that violated the very humanity they claimed to protect. Still, the palace believed Zara would keep quiet as she always had. But then came the moment that pushed her past the point of no return. In a private confrontation that was meant to correct her doubts, Zara was summoned into a room where senior royals waited, expecting her submission, expecting her apology, expecting her to fall in line as she always had. Instead, they were met with something they never anticipated: a woman no longer afraid, no longer silent, and no longer willing to defend a system that had crossed one line too many. What was meant to be a simple conversation became a collision of loyalty and truth, a moment where decades of buried frustration finally rose to the surface. The meeting began with the palace's usual choreography: measured voices, carefully crafted phrases, and smiles sharpened into instruments of control. They spoke to her as though she were fragile, misguided, in need of gentle correction rather than genuine understanding. Their tone carried an unmistakable message. You're overreacting. You don't understand the bigger picture. You must protect the family. These were not reassurances. They were calculated attempts to make her doubt her own judgment, to convince her that the pain she witnessed and the injustice she felt were merely misunderstandings. Zara recognized it instantly: gaslighting wrapped in royal polish. As the conversation deepened, Emotional leverage replaced subtlety. They invoked duty, reputation, lineage. They reminded her of how much the monarchy had given her, how she had benefited from the institution she now questioned. Their words were chosen to shame, to guilt, to bend her back into place. But Zara didn't flinch. For the first time, she listened without absorbing the blame, without allowing their narrative to drown out her own clarity. Her calmness unnerved them. They expected anger, tears, or defensiveness, anything but the unwavering composure that revealed she had already made up her mind. When they attempted to reframe the recent punishment inflicted on her loved one, Zara stopped them. She refused to accept their justification, refused to let them hide behind protocol and tradition. She spoke plainly, naming what she had seen, calling out the cruelty they insisted was necessary. Every sentence she delivered tightened the air in the room. She was no longer speaking as a submissive granddaughter or a dutiful relative. She was speaking as someone who had finally understood the cost of silence. And the more she exposed the truth, the more panic flickered beneath their controlled expressions. The tension broke when Zara delivered the words they had not prepared themselves to hear. With a voice stripped of hesitation, she declared she would no longer defend the monarchy's rules. A system that punished the vulnerable, manipulated loyalty, and masked harm behind ceremony no longer deserved her protection. Those present froze. Some inhaled, sharply. Others stared as though she had spoken a threat rather than a conviction. They weren't shocked because she disagreed, they were shocked because she dared to say it out loud. The room, once filled with confident authority, now felt fragile. They realized in that moment the significance of her transformation. Zara wasn't rebelling impulsively. She wasn't emotional or confused. She was certain. And certainty in the hands of someone who had seen the monarchy's hidden machinery was far more dangerous than anger or resentment. In her refusal, they heard something larger than dissent. They heard the possibility of exposure. But the monarchy's greatest fear wasn't what Zara said in that room. It was what she might reveal next. In a private confrontation that was meant to correct her doubts, Zara was summoned into a room where senior royals waited, expecting her submission, expecting her apology, expecting her to fall in line as she always had. Instead, they were met with something they never anticipated. A woman no longer afraid, no longer silent, and no longer willing to defend a system that had crossed one line too many. What was meant to be a simple conversation became a collision of loyalty and truth, a moment where decades of buried frustration finally rose to the surface. The meeting began with the palace's usual choreography: measured voices, carefully crafted phrases, and smiles sharpened into instruments of control. They spoke to her as though she were fragile, misguided, in need of gentle correction rather than genuine understanding. Their tone carried an unmistakable message. You're overreacting. You don't understand the bigger picture. You must protect the family. These were not reassurances. They were calculated attempts to make her doubt her own judgment, to convince her that the pain she witnessed and the injustice she felt were merely misunderstandings. Zara recognized it instantly: gaslighting wrapped in royal polish. As the conversation deepened, emotional leverage replaced subtlety. They invoked duty, reputation, lineage. They reminded her of how much the monarchy had given her, how she had benefited from the institution she now questioned. Their words were chosen to shame, to guilt, to bend her back into place. But Zara didn't flinch. For the first time, she listened without absorbing the blame, without allowing their narrative to drown out her own clarity. Her calmness unnerved them. They expected anger, tears, or defensiveness. Anything but the unwavering composure that revealed she had already made up her mind. When they attempted to reframe the recent punishment inflicted on her loved one, Zara stopped them. She refused to accept their justification, refused to let them hide behind protocol and tradition. She spoke plainly, naming what she had seen, calling out the cruelty they insisted was necessary. Every sentence she delivered tightened the air in the room. She was no longer speaking as a submissive granddaughter or a dutiful relative. She was speaking as someone who had finally understood the cost of silence. And the more she exposed the truth, the more panic flickered beneath their controlled expressions. The tension broke when Zara delivered the words they had not prepared themselves to hear. With a voice stripped of hesitation, she declared she would no longer defend the monarchy's rules, a system that punished the vulnerable, manipulated loyalty, and masked harm behind ceremony no longer deserved her protection. Those present froze. Some inhaled sharply, others stared as though she had spoken a threat rather than a conviction. They weren't shocked because she disagreed, they were shocked because she dared to say it out loud. The room, once filled with confident authority, now felt fragile. They realized in that moment the significance of her transformation. Zara wasn't rebelling impulsively. She wasn't emotional or confused. She was certain. And certainty in the hands of someone who had seen the monarchy's hidden machinery was far more dangerous than anger or resentment. In her refusal, they heard something larger than dissent. They heard the possibility of exposure. But the monarchy's greatest fear wasn't what Zara said in that room, it was what she might reveal next. Zara didn't just walk away from the monarchy's rules. She walked away holding truths the crown desperately wanted buried. And while she didn't expose every secret, she hinted at enough to make the palace tremble. Her silence became more dangerous than any public statement, because the question that gnawed at the institution was simple and terrifying. What exactly is Zara Tindall protecting the world from knowing? That question echoed through corridors where fear replaced certainty, and where whispers carried more weight than the official briefings desperately circulated by senior aides. In the hours following her confrontation, palace advisors scrambled with a panic they tried and failed to hide. They knew Zara's refusal wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate, shaped by years of watching the inner workings of the monarchy in ways few could truly comprehend. Worse, they knew she had witnessed things they never expected her to question. Her confession carried implications dark, dangerous implications that she was sitting on information that could pierce the monarchy's carefully crafted image. They held emergency meetings, dissecting every word she had spoken, frightened not by what she declared publicly, but by what she might reveal next if pushed any further. Family members felt the shockwave instantly. Those closest to Zara began panicking as they realized she knew more than anyone had assumed. She had seen the consequences of hidden decisions, the manipulation disguised as tradition, the selective enforcement of rules meant to protect some while sacrificing others. They understood that Zara's silence was not passive. It was a warning. A warning that there were truths she could unleash, and once spoken, they could never be contained again. And the more the palace attempted to tighten its grip, the more likely it became that Zara would choose conscience over secrecy. But Zara herself was trapped in a storm of conflicting emotions. She wasn't driven by thirst for revenge or a desire to tear the monarchy apart. She was caught in the agonizing space between protecting those she loved and honoring the moral duty she felt burning inside her. She carried painful knowledge that could expose injustices but also wound people she had no wish to harm. Every moment of her silence came at a cost, weighing on her with a force that grew heavier each day. She knew that speaking out would bring clarity, but it would also ignite a fire the monarchy would never extinguish. Inside the palace, fear churned into something more volatile. Advisors whispered that Zara's confession could inspire others to question the rules. That, if she, the dependable one, broke her silence, then others with deeper wounds and darker experiences might find the courage to do the same. A chain reaction was their greatest nightmare, one voice leading to 2, then 5, then a chorus the crown could no longer suppress. And the truth was brutally simple. Zara's confession wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything the monarchy had hoped to avoid. Her decision had cracked the surface of an institution built on secrecy, and even though she hadn't spoken the full truth, everyone sensed it pulsing just beneath her words. Something powerful, something dangerous, something capable of rewriting how the world saw the monarchy. And those closest to her began to realize that Zara's silence might not hold forever. And while the palace wrestled with containment, the outside world was about to catch the first ripples of Zara's rebellion. Once whispers leaked that Zara had taken a stand against royal rules, the Media didn't wait for confirmation. Headlines ignited. Commentators speculated wildly. Social platforms roared. And suddenly the monarchy was in the position it feared most, losing control of the narrative. With every hour, Zara's silent rebellion grew louder, forcing the palace to scramble for damage control they no longer knew how to execute. What should have remained a private fracture burst into a public firestorm, one that spread too quickly for the crown to contain. It began with one anonymous source claiming that Zara had challenged the monarchy's internal rule system. That single spark lit a bonfire across every major outlet. Broadcasters debated the meaning of her refusal. Journalists dredged up her past interviews, looking for signs she had always been quietly dissatisfied. Online forums exploded with theories that ranged from sympathetic to explosive. And through it all, one question kept resurfacing. What would drive someone as loyal, discreet, and steady as Zara Tindall to confront her own family? The palace's refusal to comment only fanned the flames. Their silence wasn't read as measured leadership, it was read as panic. Every no statement at this time was interpreted as confirmation that something enormous was happening behind the scenes. And the more the palace tried to retreat into its well-worn strategy of quiet dignity, the more uncontrollable the story became. Reporters dug deeper. Former staff members hinted that they were not surprised. Public opinion shifted sharply. People who once overlooked Zara's presence now saw her as a symbol of courage, a woman who dared speak truth from within a system built on silence. Inside the royal circles, tension erupted into a quiet, venomous blame game. Advisors accused each other of mishandling the fallout. Family members whispered about which office had leaked the confrontation. Fingers pointed in every direction, and loyalty dissolved into suspicion. Some believed the leak had come from someone sympathetic to Zara. Others were convinced it had been a strategic attack, designed to turn her into a liability. But no matter who caused it, the result remained the same. The monarchy was caught in a storm it could not control. Meanwhile, the public's fascination only deepened. People weren't just curious, they were invested. Zara suddenly became a figure of intrigue, someone whose silence carried more power than royal speeches. The pressure mounted for her to address the rumors, to confirm or deny the whispers shaping her image. Commentators demanded clarity. Citizens began calling for transparency from the monarchy itself. Even those who usually ignored royal drama found themselves drawn into the unfolding crisis, sensing that this wasn't just gossip, but a rare glimpse into the internal fractures of a centuries-old institution. As the frenzy intensified, the palace realized that Zara's silence was becoming a threat greater than any public accusation. Every an hour she refrained from speaking allowed the narrative to grow more unpredictable, more dangerous, and more sympathetic to her side. The monarchy, which had always relied on shaping its own story, now found itself cornered. It needed to regain control quickly and decisively before Zara chose to reveal anything they feared she held. But before the world could hear from Zara herself, the monarchy made one last, desperate move. Behind gilded doors, the monarchy attempted what it had succeeded at for generations, silencing dissent before it spread. But this time, the target wasn't a junior aide, a distant relative, or a disgraced aristocrat. It was Zara Tindall, trusted, beloved, protected by the public, and their attempt to control her would only push her further, accelerating the very downfall they hoped to prevent. They believed they could handle her the same way they handled every threat, privately, quietly, with the weight of tradition pressing down until resistance crumbled. But they miscalculated. Zara wasn't the same woman they had once relied upon to stay silent. Their first move was deceptively gentle, a request for a clarification meeting, dressed in the language of concern but unmistakably designed to corner her. Advisors brought forward a draft statement, polished and manipulated to erase the true meaning behind her confession. It painted Zara as emotional, misunderstood, overwhelmed by recent events. It framed her words as a moment of personal stress rather than a deliberate stance. And as they slid the scripted narrative across the table, they expected her to nod, sign, and swallow whatever truth she had intended to expose. But Zara didn't even touch the document. She rejected it instantly, leaving the room frozen in disbelief. They tried to persuade her with familiar tactics, subtle guilt, gentle warnings, reminders of her duty. When that failed, the tone shifted. Conversations grew sharper. They hinted her public image could suffer. They raised the possibility that privileges she had long taken for granted might be re-evaluated. They reminded her that stepping out of line came with consequences. Consequences that could echo beyond her alone. Those veiled threats once would have shaken her, but now they only strengthened her resolve. What unsettled the palace most was her calm. Zara didn't shout or argue. She didn't panic. She simply refused to be rewritten. And that unshakable composure signaled something far more dangerous than rebellion. It signaled transformation. She had reached a point beyond fear. She had stepped into a clarity the monarchy could not manipulate, and that terrified them more than anything she could have said. As tensions escalated, the more rational advisors began warning the institution that pushing her harder would only provoke a worse outcome. They argued that Zara had become too sympathetic, too human, too relatable to risk turning into a martyr. But their warnings were ignored in favor of strategy, containment, and outdated traditions that had ruled the monarchy for decades. They believed they could still force the narrative into submission if they acted quickly. Meanwhile, Zara quietly prepared for the moment the palace feared most. She knew she could no longer remain silent. She knew the public deserved to hear the truth from her, not sanitized through advisors or twisted by palace spin. And every attempt to suppress her voice pushed her closer to the edge, closer to the moment she would stand before the world and speak without restraint. Her decision was no longer about defiance, it was about integrity, justice, and the heavy responsibility of knowing what the monarchy had tried so hard to conceal. And when she finally spoke, she didn't hold back, she exposed the soul of a crumbling system. When Zara Tindall finally delivered her declaration, she didn't shout, accuse, or sensationalize. She simply spoke the truth. She could no longer defend rules that broke families, controlled lives, and protected power over compassion. Her words didn't just echo across Britain, they pierced the monarchy itself, forcing a reckoning no royal strategist, no senior advisor, no quiet whisperer in the shadows had prepared for. In a single breath, she shifted the tone of the national conversation and brought forward a clarity that had been missing for generations. Her public statement reframed the entire royal narrative. Zara didn't position herself as a rebel or a victim. She stood as someone who had witnessed the contradictions between tradition and humanity, duty and dignity, loyalty and justice. She spoke for those who had endured quietly behind palace walls, for those whose voices had been smothered beneath protocol, and for those who had long accepted the monarchy's demands as inevitable burdens. Her confession wasn't an attack, it was a mirror held up to an institution that had avoided self-reflection for far too long. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Media outlets that once dismissed Zara as a background figure now framed her as the unexpected catalyst for change. Social platforms overflowed with support, outrage, curiosity, and disbelief. People questioned the rules they had never considered. They debated what the monarchy should look like in a modern world. They asked why someone as loyal and reserved as Zara had reached such a breaking point, and what that meant about the pressures hidden from public view. Conversations that had once been taboo were suddenly unavoidable. Inside the palace, the fallout was even more volatile. Some members found themselves quietly admiring her courage, recognizing the truth in her words even if they couldn't say so out loud. Others reacted with fury, convinced she had betrayed the family and endangered its stability. Old alliances fractured, new tensions surfaced. For the first time in years, the monarchy was forced to confront internal questions it had spent decades burying under tradition. Advisors scrambled to predict the next blow, uncertain whether Zara's declaration would remain an isolated incident or awaken deeper unrest among other family members. As fear spread through the institution, it became clear that Zara's confession had done more than expose cracks. It had encouraged others to wonder whether those cracks had always been there. Former staff, distant relatives, and insiders began reconsidering their own experiences, their own silence, their own complicity. The Crown sensed a shift, subtle but unmistakable, in the balance of power. If Zara could step forward, what stopped others from doing the same? What stopped a chain reaction from unraveling the carefully protected myths that had sustained the monarchy for centuries? And yet, Zara never claimed to be a revolutionary. She simply refused to carry the weight of a system that had asked too much for too long. But in refusing, she did something far greater than she intended. She opened a door that could not be closed again. Her declaration became a spark in a room filled with quiet resentment, unspoken truths, and years of suppressed emotion. And as the monarchy braces for the storm that Zara unwittingly unleashed, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Once the first crack appears, the entire foundation eventually answers. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.